Good morning, dear participants in our seminar, artists and art lovers. On behalf of Hanaholmen, I'm more than happy to wish you all, both our audience on site and remotely, participating in this event. Warmly welcome to this seminar. My name is Tiina-Liisa Granholm, and I work as a project manager here at Hanaholmen, the Swedish Finnish Cultural Center. Hanaholmen has a special role in fostering collaborations in cultural, social, business sectors between Sweden and Finland and the Nordic countries. In the field of art, our work has during the last years included different kinds of bilateral projects and gathered together artists, experts, curators, researchers from Sweden and Finland, both in real-life meetings and webinars. We have compared different ways of acquiring and producing and procuring art for public spaces. We have discussed art, the role of artists, and the role of curators. A gift from the Swedish state was the start for the Hanaholmen art collection, today counting over 300 works of art, including paintings, graphic, sculptures, and a collection of medals. Today, the art at Hanaholmen also spreads to the surroundings in our art park and presents 11 works by mostly contemporary artists from Nordic countries. Some of the works are state gifts located on Hanaholmen by State of Art Commission Finland. Some belong to the art collection of Hanaholmen Cultural Center. During the lunch break today, we will take a short walk in the art park, and for our online participants, we will show the virtual tour. Please stay online. The tour starts 13:35, just before our afternoon session. Today, in this seminar, we will focus on perspectives on a work of art. And before I will pass the word to the organizers, I want to remind you about some practical things. This event is run as a Zoom meeting, and we wish that you all participate, both here and online. If you want to say something, just raise your hand, here and online. And our remote participants, you can keep your camera open and your microphone muted. And when you are given the word, you just open your mic and speak. And you can also write your questions and comments into the chat channel, and we will repeat them here in our on-site session. Thank you, and now I will pass the word to Reetta Hiltunen, the chairperson of Taiteilijat O, Artists O. Welcome, Reetta.
Hey, hi for everyone. It's so nice to see you finally here. We've been waiting for this day for so long, and hard work is finally coming together. So I am Reetta Hiltunen, the chairperson of Artists O, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our background and about this exhibition today. Artists O is a society for artists working in a field of applied arts. We are celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. The society has about 150 members. The aim of the society is to increase awareness and recognition of fine arts as related to applied arts, and to strengthen the position of this type of art within the field of contemporary art. A societal perspective is often emphasized in the activities of Artists O. Art has been brought to new target group and into new environments. The society organizes exhibitions and events both nationally and internationally, and provides its members with training and new revenue avenues. Artist O's 15th anniversary exhibition Länk, Link, Linkki from the 9th of September to 30th of January 2022 here at Hanaholmen, the Swedish Finnish Cultural Center, is an interesting overview of current state of fine arts within applied arts, and visible result of the collaboration between Finnish Artist O and Fiber Arts Sweden. The members of both of these two artist societies work broadly in the areas of fine arts, design, and crafts. And their work is often characterized by strong relationship with the materials used. The chosen materials also often defines the concrete and thematic content of the works of art. The thematic content of this exhibition has been created in a collaborative process between artists from two societies in these two countries, Finland and Sweden. The realization of this joint exhibition is the result of resolute and long-term collaboration. Working together at grassroots level requires successful dialogue and methodic planning, and in order to share perspectives and goals to be realized. The name of the exhibition, Länk, Link, Linkki, points towards the bond of collaboration and the will to act together. These were the things that were essential for this exhibition to come to life. In the synergy of this exhibition, artists' societies in the field of applied arts from Finland and Sweden come together. Artists and art from two countries meet. Artists' aim is to strengthen international collaboration has been realized in this form of exhibition, regardless of the obstacles brought by the pandemic. This significance of creative collaboration and meeting between artists is highlighted and emphasized even further. Together, we have created functional working methods and collaborative creative work in the world that's changed. These new methods and de facto also made the exhibition reality. I'd like to thank all the artists and collaboration partners and financial supporters, which has been great this time. And this exhibition, especially Artists O's team that made this exhibition possible. And of course, Hanaholmen is a great place to have this exhibition, and it crowns the result of our joint efforts. I want to ask Mia and Thea to come to here. Mia Kallio and Thea Stolt Glanville has been our producers this year and organizing this event, and it's been great working with you, and so nice that you are here and you'll be taking this day further. Yes, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Thea Stolt Glanville, and I'm going to be your moderator this morning. Mia will be the moderator for the afternoon after our lunch break. So we have fantastic guest speakers today, and our first speaker of this morning is the wonderful adjunct professor Martta Heikkilä, PhD, who works as a researcher in aesthetics at the University of Helsinki. She's especially interested in current theories of art, and in particular post-phenomenological and structuralist philosophy of art. And recently, she's been really interested in the concept of artwork and its transformations, which is also the theme of her current research project. And Professor Heikkilä's presentation today focuses on the relationship between materiality and conceptuality in contemporary art. So please welcome adjunct Professor Martta Heikkilä, PhD, to the podium. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tea, and thank you all for the invitation to come to speak to your seminar, and especially thanks to Mia Kallio, a longtime friend of mine, who personally made this invitation to me. So I'm an adjunct professor or docent in Finnish, so not an actual professor. And as Tea told, I work as a researcher in aesthetics. So my paper is titled In Between Materiality and the Two Paradigms of Contemporary Art, or this could be also materiality and two paradigms in contemporary art, because of course these are not only the only paradigms we have, but some of those. And my talk, in the background of my talk is the idea of material-based art that your exhibition also represents, and artists owe in general, and also my current research project. So in my paper, I discussed two fairly recent models or paradigms of visual art. They can be recognized to affect both art both practically, that is, the making of art, as well as theoretically. What I shall present here are two accounts that touch upon the foundations of contemporary art, or if we like, we can also speak of essence, although it's a very controversial term. First, I reflect upon the current, often repeated idea that contemporary art is dematerialized, as Lucy Lippard famously laid it out in the late 1960s. According to this idea, art would be equivalent to thinking, or even philosophy or theory. Following this path, art would be more or less equal to language, or at least heavily dependent on linguistic processes. According to the second view, art is first and foremost material in character. Art would not yield anything to thinking in the measure of, let's say, Lippard's idea, nor would it convey any idea unless there is a material basis to art. Therefore, art cannot be identified with any existing concept, like the concept, even the concept of art or work of art, as they appear too totalizing and all-encompassing to contain all the variety that is produced and acknowledged as art or its works. They are endlessly mutable and context-dependent, according to the idea that is based on the very materiality of art. Thus, art would be also outside the sphere of thinking finally, while philosophers, it's true that philosophers write constantly around art. In its unreachability, or its reluctance to yield to concept, art then proves to be of constant interest. So first I go to the idea of art as dematerialized. So what is at stake in the view of art as immaterial or dematerial? It doesn't mean that art would henceforth be without any material support. Instead, according to the notion of dematerialized art, the task of contemporary art is not primarily to make itself visible for aesthetic appreciation, but to make art's conditions visible to the spectator. What constitutes the very practice of art is now the question. It is far from natural and eternal, but it's endlessly tied to its social, intellectual, material, and institutional conditions and preferences. Oh, I will change slide from the remote. Yes. Okay. To begin with the birth of the aesthetic notion of art, until the 19th century, the demand that art should somehow make a picture of the world, even to give a faithful imitation of our reality, was still valid. However, new forms of art began to emerge. It was understood that the older requirements of art concerning reality couldn't be valid any longer. Until the 19th century, art was in one way or another involved with the demands of realism and representation. The criteria of realism was a thought that there was a world outside of us, either concrete or in our ideas, which was independent of our values and thinking. Art should then imitate this reality as faithfully as it could. However, as it's often considered, it was with the emergence of modernist art, and especially Cubism in the first decades of the 20th century, that the elements of language began for the first time to enter programmatically the visual field of painting. This mimetic account is encountered in today's ideas. According to them, art, while it's not conceptual art in the sense of the 1960s, is however fundamentally conceptual by nature. From the mid-60s until the 70s, the practices of conceptual art reflected on the construction and role of the author, reception and of art and the spectator, as well as pictorial representation. This means that the artist reflects mainly on the idea that is to be understood to ground the work. We can take this one as an example. Whereas the aesthetic appearance and material means to achieve the wanted effect are secondary. These questions are deeply intertwined with what art is supposed to be. The traditional modernistic conception of art that the first picture examples were about was considered aesthetic by nature. It was based on the view that the single author of the work, the artist, produces a visible object to be appreciated by the spectator. Conceptual practices, in turn, are often discussed in reference to the aspect of dematerialization of the art object and of a democratization of the art world that it is hoped would accompany it. According to modernist art critic and theoretician Clement Greenberg, realistic or illusionist art had concealed the medium, while modernism used art to call attention to it. If the limitations of painting, such as the flat surface and the properties of pigment, were earlier considered as negative factors, modernist painting regarded the same limitations as positive features that were to be acknowledged openly. We can take this one here as a background. In other words, the medium made painting as art conscious of itself in a new way, which also provided more autonomy to the work of art. The autonomy of art means the notion according to which both the production and reception of art emerge from the discourses of art itself. As a consequence, art and the use of artistic means started to seem significant by themselves and not as making reference to the exterior world. In most theories, the rupture between realism and modernism took place with the advent of post-impressionist paintings. It became evident that post-impressionists, such as Edouard Manet, didn't attempt to successfully imitate real forms, but rather created new ones, which were, as such, as real as the object's form that realist and older art had been thought to imitate. The 19th century principle, art for art's sake, l'art pour l'art, became now significant in a radical way. In the 1960s, a change that already had been in the air began to take figure properly. Art was no longer considered only within the scheme of the visible, but it started to be also a matter of thinking rather than mere perception. Movements such as pop art, minimalism, and conceptual art now emerged. Just to take a couple of examples. It's by Yves Klein. At that time, aesthetic appreciation that was still the foremost criteria in modernist theories was considered outdated and overly bourgeois. In the field of aesthetics and philosophy of art, becoming conscious of what had defined the aesthetic field of modernism was required in a situation where the earlier, so to say, modern patterns of art didn't seem to be sufficient to explain the turns of artistic practices and theories. First of all, artists and theorists alike started to think that one should make the conditions visible, the economical stakes, the position of artist, who is and who has been entitled to be an artist was one question, as well as class and gender. And all these invisible, non-aesthetic conditions, that is, what is not perceptible as such on the surface of the work, now became important questions. Oh, I think that the text is somewhere underneath the image. So it's a performance by Joseph Beuys, I Like America and America Likes Me from 1974. Here is an example of minimalist painting Donald Judd with his sculptures from 1970. And a painting that is entitled Love by Robert Indiana. But sorry, the text is hidden for some reason. Namely, what has happened in art has been, since the 60s, the rise of new forms and genres of art, video art and moving image, performances, happenings, land art, conceptual art, and adjacent theories have given primacy not to the aesthetic sensuous appearance of art and its subjective reception, but to what exists beyond the works of art themselves. Benjamin Buchler, known as a critic of conceptual art, has raised questions associated with the principle of site specificity. Art that was called site-specific was expanded to include the analysis of the devices of discursive framing, as well as a critique of the institutional conventions of exhibition and display. Material support systems, physical, socio-political, and linguistic components. Situational aesthetics, developed in the late 60s, shows the cognitive and perceptual conditions of future art production. This is visible in the works by the American artist, for example, in the works by American artist Louis Lawler and the so-called pictures generation of the 1970s that she represented together with Cindy Sherman, Laurie Simmons, and Barbara Kruger. This is a work by Laurie Simmons from 1981. Following the criticism targeted at the earlier aesthetic concept of art and with it the modernist agenda, any return to an unconditional autonomy of art has since been judged to be extremely problematic, if not downright impossible. The development between traditional aesthetics of sensuous perception and judgment and apprehension of formal elements in art implies considering the importance of thinking, cognition, and discourses in the reception of art. And this can, of course, be called its non-aesthetic context. The shift from modernist to postmodern art meant also a shift to dematerialized and post-aesthetic conception of art. However, arts being anti-material and post-aesthetic only referred to, or mainly referred to, the fact that in both art and its relevant theories, the non-visual aspects were now emphasized. In this, as for example, Lucy Lippard that I first mentioned, brings out there have been 2 points of departure for this development. First, to understand art as idea, as an intellectual or formal model, and secondly, to understand art as action. Both these alternatives made visible a new interest in the disappearance of art's physical development, in that art would either deny matter and a sensation would turn into a concept, or that matter would turn into energy in motion and motion in time. I now move to the second part of my presentation, namely the notion that emphasizes, unlike the first ones, the very material foundations of art. As I already said, in the 60s and 70s, what became important were the dimensions that were not directly perceptible on the surface of art objects, such as references to and relations with other works, phenomena and traditions of art, theories and history, the influence of politics and society from which artworks emerge, as well as the recurring themes and mediums in art, which give it different connotations in diverging contexts. It is thought that the work of art is not a self-enclosed, immanent object, but it's always related to and even dependent on the reality that surrounds us. At the same time, the meaning of artwork is not purely in the work, in the framed or otherwise clear-cut object that stands out in the midst of other things. Nowadays, one can often encounter the idea that art has turned into philosophy. What it really may refer to is a thing to be speculated upon and remains outside the proper scope of my paper. On the other hand, it is also acknowledged that artist meanings do have a kind of concrete material basis, if not else than in the sense they provide in a spectator, in his or her mind or body. This sense-producing ground may be either empirical or not. It is some kind of presentation. The sensation affects us, touches us in one way or another, and this touch is real, as recently deceased French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy has put it. So the forthcoming examples come from your exhibitions that will be open today. What then is implied in this idea if we speak of art from the viewpoint of materiality? Since at least the 90s, there has been a constant interest in the bodily foundations of art in both its making and experiencing. This means that the scope of sensuousness has come into spotlight in a new way, which has brought into focus the locality and concreteness of the artistic material, as well as the situated position of the spectator. What matters is not only eyesight and objective observation from a distance, but also the fact that the spectator is always and somehow immersed in time and place, and his or her abilities and motives in appreciating art are always personal and in several ways affected by the surroundings. Instead of thinking of art and the subject of experience generally, the uniqueness of each body, and especially the politics of the body, has become central in discussions of art and the aesthetic during the past decades. In this, the influence of phenomenology, especially that of Maurice Merleau-Ponty and his followers, has been decisive in recent discussions. According to them, art and experience are never merely reducible to processes of thinking. The idea of art's materiality often involves the thought that what we call art is nowhere but in its material singular instances, in brief, in concrete works of art. As a consequence of this account, many philosophers have turned to the notion that art and its experience resist being turned into placeless, eternal concepts and definitions. As for example, another French philosopher, Jacques Derrida, has emphasized, it's only possible for a philosopher to speak and write around art, not of or about art, which would mean the appropriation of artworks and trying to make it conceptual, because art cannot, in his opinion, be translated into language as such. Namely, there is an inexhaustible materiality in art that, somewhat paradoxically, generates more and more language, more writing, for Derrida, among other philosophers. So this thought that art couldn't be accommodated by any linguistic means emerged especially in the 60s in theories of art. For example, because art is too varied and too multifaceted to be appropriated by language. An artwork is always intrinsically too diverse for that. It's composed of innumerable details which interact as a specific combination in exactly this work that we have an experience of. There are always too many and too concrete details in an artwork, and the ways they affect each other are too multiple. And these are the reasons why the work is bound to escape our language. At the same time, the references that the work makes to the world around it, both concrete and theoretical, are too manifold and open-ended to be expressed in any ultimately true uncontroversial fashion. So the work of art, according to this notion, leaves always an unreachable residue after it, and it allows more interpretations and things to be perceived and thought of than we can express verbally. Derrida, among other thinkers, and many art historians and philosophers, especially in the post-structuralist tradition, argue that the existence of art and artworks is then finally irreducible to any general claims. This is why art differs from other objects of philosophical treatise. Art is, as the perception of experience, as the perception or experience of art has proved too various to be subsumed under a definite concept or any single ideas, it means an irreplaceable target for thinkers in that it cannot be grasped by knowledge or discourses. With the so-called postmodern and post-structuralist philosophers of the 60s, such as Derrida and Nancy, and also, for example, Jacques Rancière, these ideas have led to the notion that the philosopher's scope are the words that are pronounced around art. As Derrida says, words may only touch upon the works of art, but their touching necessarily takes place at a distance. This means that between art and theories, there is always a gap. Language and the materiality of artworks remain apart. According to many philosophers, already in the phenomenological tradition, let's say in the 50s or 60s and onwards, thinking has always, so to say, strived to appropriate art, to make it part of philosophical discourses. The primary example is also like, as the primary example, Hegel is often mentioned, and his idealist philosophy in the first decades of the 19th century. From one viewpoint, art thus possesses a certain degree of autonomy for deconstructionist thinkers. The purpose of art is to present its existence as art on the grounds of its material irreducibility. That cannot be returned to knowledge. On the other hand, art is never unaffected by the rest of our reality, and it's part of the larger network of things that, for example, Derrida calls text. Therefore, art participates and is influenced by what happens in the world, how it's conceived of. As a result, art is never only or purely art, nor is it merely the outcome of the artist's subjective intention or the ideas in his or her thinking mind. Art historians with their background in post-structuralist theories, such as Rosalind Krauss, Douglas Crimp, and Georges Didier Huberman in France, have adopted a similar idea concerning art's materiality that is unconsumable. This means to say that it holds its secret that, in fact, is nowhere but right on the surface of the work and in its opening to different contexts and conditions. A work of art is open to interpretations, open to the world. The idea of art's reality appears in, for example, the recent writings of the Swedish curator Maria Lind. One of her quests is to analyze not what the artwork is, but rather what it does in the world, how it has come into being, and how the artist does his or her work within the system, the art world, as it was called 50 years ago. Such questions involve how and what happened in the making of art and its projects, the work itself, if there is a work itself, and its public reception, the context of production and reception, both in the past and present. What Maria Lind concludes then is that the trace left on us is material, or even the thought of the trace alone is material, even if any reference to the reality would have already disappeared. Here, for example, Maria Lind refers to an exhibition, Are You Experienced, by Nadia Beleric. This was on display in Canada. So first, as a last point, I can go to the question or my own speculation whether demateriality could be materialized. This view, or the view of art's dematerialized has been protested, however. According to the so-called new materialist and post-humanist theorists, such as Suhail Malik, all theoreticians of today rely on the notion of subjective experience that cannot be thought of rationally without distorting it. For example, as Malik claims, Rosalind Krauss and her fellow thinkers emphasize the materiality and escape from thought, having Georges Bataille's concept of formless as their basis. For Malik, this is not enough, though. For the aforementioned thinkers, the model of linguistic reception is still valid. This means that art would exist only in experience and it is conditioned by it. The new materialist requirement is then a new kind of realism that would be situated outside of thinking and subjectivity. Then, to be asked is, what is the kind of art that wouldn't be sensed and appreciated by any means of reception? What is the kind of realism and materiality that would be beyond any human scheme, and that would, more radically than in earlier theories, dismantle until the end the aesthetic experience as the condition of art? So this is just a proposition, not my own view. In recent years, art theoreticians, especially in the field of this new materialism, have adopted the notion that in art, materiality works and creates meaningful configurations as if by itself. In her account, Karen Barrett, for example, has brought out that no things or phenomena exist as themselves before they encounter each other in some situation. Meanings are thinkable only beginning from mutual relations between things, when concepts and materiality meet one another. Here they act as agents in a given situation. Such events, where relations are born, are called interaction by Barrett. It refers to the encounter between the verbal and the non-verbal in the phenomena of the world. In artworks of the post-human age, attention has been paid more and more to the non-linguistic world, such as animals, other living organisms, weather phenomena, or processes of land in how they change and provoke changes in their environment. In general, a new interest in natural sciences and materiality has arisen among artists. There are also varieties in which different networks and systems create works of art. In them, instead of the author-subject and the aesthetic reception, the emphasis is on the relations born out of the agents at play. In this kind of object-oriented processes, the human subject and the systems of non-human actors appear as equal. One example of this is the video installation that you can see. It's called On Belonging and made by Terike Haapoja. It was a Finnish contemporary artist. It was recently on display in Helsinki Kunsthalle in the exhibition Coming to Our Senses. In the video, shot at the Bronx Zoo during the pandemic, the animals close to their cages look at us. The work raises the questions concerning the animal rights and the possibilities of contact and communication between the two species, humans and animals. Yet it's possible to inquire if this new material or new realist orientation really is free from the models provided by language and our conceptual systems, or even from the tradition of conceptual art. New material leaves open the question whether it's possible to liberate art from our pre-existing schemes and human thought, and at the same time, to conceive it as art and as meaningful. This is a criticism that can be often encountered, but that may also offer interesting perspectives for further developments in the matter of subjectivity in art. The two positions that I have laid out above, demateriality and materiality, and by their side, new materiality and new realism, are all constructed in different ways and according to different ends or goals. In all of them, the questioning of subjectivity and the uncontested author and aesthetic receiver are at stake. Therefore, as I have wished to present, there are reasons to think that demateriality, materiality, and their recent alternatives all have something to say about the place of the material in art and its complexity in front of thinking. It may tell about the production and status of images, which is now more about perception and illusion, the oscillation between materiality and immateriality, the abstract and the concrete. The use of digital devices has made the situation more complex than before. Along with its tangible existence, matter is a subject of new conditions, and the literal presence of objects, things, and concrete production of forms are now, maybe in a stronger sense than before, like ghosts. The reality is in traces left on our perception and thinking. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adjunct Professor Martta Heikkilä, for your thought-provoking start to this morning. You have gotten us started and thinking, and I'm sure that somebody here or among our remote participants will have some questions. So we will be now taking questions from the audience, and those of you who are attending remotely, you can write your questions in the chat, and Hanasaari's own Alexandra and Tiina-Liisa will read out your questions and will give you your turn. Now, if anyone here has a question, you can talk to your microphone, and also for all participants, only turn your microphone on when you present your question, and then turn it off, please. So let's get started. Anyone here would like to start? Yes, Anna, please.
Okay, great. Hey, looking from the history of art, how do you see the future? Where is it going, actually? Can you predict that for us?
Art is about experimenting, so it's very difficult to know now what is about to come, because what will come, or art tends to expand itself.
I would like to maybe a little bit give another point of view, that nowadays many art forms are actually going more close to each other, like crafts and all these multidisciplinary works and fine and applied arts. So do you see something in there maybe, or how would you describe the future from this point of view?
Yes. Yes, it is often acknowledged nowadays that medium specificity is very much a thing of the past, and in my research project, I guess that it's one factor in the scheme of that, or the claim that art has turned into thinking, that it's not any longer tied to specific material processes or specific processes required by the medium, but they are combined or mixed more and more than before. And many artists have entered the conceptual scheme in that they emphasize expression much more than the handling with the material. But it's one alternative, because like what artists do, as far as I understand, you are very much taking seriously the requirements of the material. So I think there are many schemes that exist at the same time, or many approaches to this question. And none of them is, of course, right as such, but they coexist.
Thank you, Professor Heikkilä. It's delightful that you presented examples from artists' own work in your presentation. So that was also lovely. We'll all see them later today in the exhibition upstairs. Anyone else here with any questions? Yes, please. Mia Heikkilä, Mia Kallio from Artists' Own.
Thank you. I was wondering that because you show the pictures from our exhibition, that could you give some example of how things you dealt with in the speech are reflected in the artworks of this exhibition?
Well, I must say that I haven't seen this exhibition as such. I have only had a glance to the catalogue from which the pictures I had also come from. I think for myself, when I saw those examples, it was quite pretty clear that they really deal with the sense of touching, especially that they all have a kind of tactility that is necessary both in making them and also to the audience that sees them, that the audience or at least I had the impression that I would need to touch those works to understand what they are about, to understand how they have emerged.
I think that's something in common with members of Artists' Own and Fiber Art Sweden, because we work very strongly with materiality.
Yes, and also the thing of the scale. I think it's important in them. There was one picture or image from a video still. I can't remember. I think it was by a Swedish artist.
Lotte Nilsson Välimaa.
Yes, and the huge construction in the middle of some historic room. I think it made it very approachable, or the idea approachable to myself as a spectator. That when I would take steps towards that ball-like construction, it would have an effect on my perception of the work. That I don't only need to see it from a distance from the picture, but also the sense of the real is very strong in that work. Yeah.
Yes, the video is upstairs in the exhibition as well. It's called Truncated Icosahedron. So that's our Swedish artists, one of their contributions. So, anyone else? Is there anything in the chat yet? Or are we still getting started? Thank you. In that case, we can soon move on to our next presentation. Now let's give a hand for Adjunct Professor Martta Heikkilä for this wonderful presentation. Thank you, Martta.